time together. And so I'm pumped that we still get one last club to be with y'all. Last night, we got to hear the incredible story of Jesus going to the cross for us. Of Jesus taking on our sin. The penalty of our sin he took on so that we could be restored again with God. And he died. He died for us. He died for me. He died for your leaders. He died for all of you. He died in our place. And friends, this morning, we have some really good news. Because Jesus didn't stay dead. Death did not get the final say. Jesus did a bunch of miracles. Some incredible miracles. But his greatest miracle of all is that he defeated death. Oh. Jesus. Oh. Okay, no. There you go. Jesus defeated death. He came back to life. And I know what you may be thinking. Prove it. Let's do that just now. Here's what happened. When Jesus died, when the Romans executed him through crucifixion, again, experts on death, they declare that he's dead, that Jesus has died. His followers scatter. A few of them stick around. A few of them go to Pilate, and they say, hey, can we take Jesus' body and bury it? Can we give him a proper burial? And so, following Jewish burial customs, they wrapped Jesus' body with spices and long sheets of linen cloth and laid him in a new tomb. So they go to Pilate. They ask him, hey, can we take Jesus' body and give him a proper burial? And they bury him. They put him in a tomb that looked a lot like this. It's kind of like on the side of the mountain in rock. They would lay him in there, and they would take that big stone, and they would roll it in front of them, sealing it forever. This was a massive stone. It took many, many men to move this stone. And it would keep the body shut inside. And so Jesus is buried in this tomb. And the disciples are scattered at this point. They have no idea. Their best friend was just killed. And they're distraught. They have no idea what to do. This was not supposed to happen. Right? And so they're together. They want to go see Jesus. They want to go to where he was buried. If you've ever lost somebody, close to you, you have a couple things that kind of go through your mind. One, you want to be alone. You don't want anybody around you. But you also at the same time want everybody around you. You want to be with people you love. You also want to go to where your loved ones are. You want to go see where they died. You want to go see where their body is so that you can feel close to them again. And the disciples are heartbroken because Jesus died on a Friday. Saturday was their Sabbath. They couldn't travel. They couldn't walk. They couldn't go see the tomb where Jesus was. So for an entire day, they're sitting in anguish, in sorrow, completely distraught. Until finally, morning breaks, Sunday morning. And it says, early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran and found Peter and the other disciple, the one who Jesus loved. I'm reading this story from the book of John. It's literally John's account, one of Jesus' followers, of what happened this day. He calls himself the one Jesus loved. He's kind of talking in third person here. He's referring to himself as the one Jesus loved. Mary says to them, they have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him. Peter and John started out for the tomb. They were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. John is kind of talking a little smack here, right? In the Bible, forever, he wanted to make sure that everyone knew, I got to the tomb first. And so he does. He runs to the tomb. John stops and looks in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Peter arrived later, after me, and went inside. He also noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who reached the tomb first, John, the faster one, also went in. I love this little trash talking here. John also went in, and he saw and believed. For until then, they still hadn't understood the scriptures that said that Jesus must rise from the dead. Then they went home. It wasn't until that John and Peter went into the tomb and saw that the linen wrappings were just laying there. There was no body. That they all of a sudden remembered, oh wait, Jesus predicted this. Jesus predicted that he would come back to life. He predicts it. He does this many times. There's 21 times while Jesus is alive that he predicts exactly what's about to happen. And all of a sudden, in that moment, it hits them. Here's one example. This is earlier in Jesus' life. Before he died, he says this: the Son of Man, me, is going to be betrayed into the hands of his enemies. He will be killed. But 3 days later, he will rise from the dead. And in that moment, it hits them. Oh yeah, he told us this would happen. So, how do we know? How do we know that Jesus came back to life? One, we have an empty tomb. Point two, the disciples actually see him in the flesh. The first person he appears to is a woman, Mary. It says, as Mary was standing outside the tomb crying, as she wept, she stooped and looked in. She saw 2 white-robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been lying. Dear woman, why are you crying? A silly question. The angels asked her. She said, because they have taken away my Lord, she replied, and I don't know where they've put him. She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him at first. Dear woman, why are you crying? Jesus asked her. Who are you looking for? She thought he was the gardener. Sir, she said, if you have taken him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will go and get him. Jesus replies with one word, her name. He says, Mary. And at the sound of her name, she realizes it was Jesus in the flesh, right there in front of her. She turns to him, cries, Rabbi, and clings to him. Jesus looks at her and says, go tell all the other disciples that I'm back. That death did not get the final say, that I am alive. And she does. She goes and tells the disciples. Now, at this point in history, culturally speaking, if you were to make this story up, the first person that you would probably not include is a woman's testimony, unfortunately. Because at the time, culturally speaking, unfortunately, women's testimony, their word, did not hold the same weight as man's. I know, awful. So if you were to make this up, you would not have the woman be the star of your show, and yet she is. Jesus saw value in every single person. And the first person he appears to is a woman named Mary. Then the disciples, they're all like, hey, we've seen the Lord. But Thomas, one of the disciples, replies, I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his arms and put my fingers into them. Right? Careful what you wish for, Thomas. 8 days later, the disciples were together, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. Then he looked right at Thomas, and he said, put your fingers here. Look at my hands. My Lord, my God, Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, you believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. Point number 2. How do we know Jesus came back to life? He appeared to his disciples. He appeared in the flesh to his followers. We have 10 accounts, 10 times in the Bible where Jesus appears to sometimes an individual, and even one time up to a crowd of 500 people. Jesus ate with them, talked with them. Jesus had risen and came back to life. Point number 3, how do we know? How do we know that Jesus really came back to life? Look at what happened in the Christian faith. A lot of movements, when the leader of a movement dies, the followers scatter, and they go on and find something else to follow after. When a leader of a movement dies, the movement dies with it. However, the disciples believed so much that they had just seen Jesus, that Jesus had come back and did exactly what he said he would do, that they were willing to die for that. They were willing to die. They gave their whole lives proclaiming what Jesus actually did, that he came back and conquered death. Many of them were executed. And the Christian faith exploded, becoming the largest religion in the world. The movement did not die. It exploded. But so what? So what, ball man? So what? So what does it mean that Jesus came back to life? What does it mean? Here's what it means, friends. It means that our future is so much more than what happens here on earth. It means that the things that you've gone through, the things that you're going through, the things that you will go through, don't define you. What it means is that when Jesus took our place on the cross, when he took our sin and died in our place, he gave us the ability to turn back to God. Something we couldn't have done on our own. He took it upon himself to go in our place so that we could be restored to the God of the universe, giving us a new life, a life that's not defined by our past mistakes, a life that's not defined by those scars, a life not defined by the scars that others have given us, but a new life, a life not bound by sin, a life where we're not trapped, a life where we have hope in a broken world. So how do we do it? How do we get this new life that you're talking about, Johnny? Well, for one, we trust. We trust that Jesus actually did what he said he did. We trust that he came back to life. It also means that we need to recognize that the life that we've been living hasn't been working out so well. It means that we first need to come to realize, man, the life that I've been living, putting myself in the middle, hasn't worked out too well. And it means that we recognize that and say, God, I want you now to be the center of my life. I've tried it. I've tried doing my own thing. It's not working. Jesus, let me try putting you at the center of my life. So we recognize that we've been living wrong. We turn back towards God. We say, God, I want you to now be the center of my life. And what a gift that is. When we turn back to God, physically, when we turn back to him, God's not waiting to be like, about time. Took you long enough. What's up with that? Where you been? No. What are his first words to the disciples? After the disciples leave him to die, his first words are, peace be with you. Peace be with you. And I think those words are for you and me today. I don't know about you all, but I could use some peace today. I could use some hope in this broken world. And when we do that, that begins our relationship with Jesus. And here's what our relationship with Jesus isn't. It doesn't mean that everything's going to now be perfect. That it's all going to be rainbows and butterflies, right? But it does mean that you have a hope and a joy that can only be found in Jesus. It means when you have a relationship with God, of course, you're still going to go through hard things. Of course, we're still going to suffer. But it means that we now have hope. It means that the things that are happening to us don't get the last say. We have a new life in Christ. A life not bound by sin, where we're no longer trapped, where we have freedom, where we can have hope in suffering. How do I know this? Well, because God is currently meeting and giving me hope in my suffering. I mentioned to you guys yesterday that my dad was diagnosed with ALS. And 3 months ago, he passed away. It was much sooner than we expected. He was out cliff jumping, of course. And he wanted to do it one last time. And the doctors believe that when he hit the water, he had a heart attack and died. And I'll say this, while it hurts like hell right now, like this is real. Like this is really recent for me. And while it hurts like hell, and I have so many questions for God, it means that I have hope even in my suffering. It means that death does not get the final say. It means that I can see my dad again. And friends, myself and your leaders want that so badly for you. We want you to experience that hope and that joy. Because it's going to radically change your life. And so this weekend, we've been looking in, just like the disciples have been looking into the tomb. And I think that the Lord is doing something in us, that something has been stirring in us. Maybe, like Mary, you've heard him calling your name. Maybe you've heard him calling your name. And friends, don't be afraid, because Jesus can't wait for you to turn back to him. So the ball's in your court. He's done the work. What's your response? Are you tired of living life without him? Are you tired of living broken and trapped by sin? Do you want to experience the hope and the joy that me and your leaders have? It's up to you. It's up to you to make the decision to turn back to God. And so if you've made that decision this weekend, I'm going to finish here and pray. And if you've made that decision, you can say this prayer with me in your head. And I'm going to send you guys back to Captain. So would you bow your heads and pray with me? Jesus, thank you for taking my place. I'm